Party people, welcome to another CyberSoul. I am with the infamous Gary Haycock-West, great friend, known him for nearly 20 years, business friend, and worst of all, he's got a lot of stories on me. Hopefully, he's kind to me. But I'm really looking forward to getting to know Gary a bit better and sharing some of his great stories. Gary, great to have you on the sofa.
Mate, that sounds worrying when you say that. But hey, ho hum. Why am I here, Jamie?
Well, you are here, Gary, because I'm really interested in getting under the bonnet of Gary Haycock-West. We've been friends, we've done business together for many years, but I'm really interested to hear your story. Where did it all begin, Gary?
What an opportunity for me to bang my gums and tell a story. Well, there we go. Well, 59 years old, grew up in Essex, proud of the fact. For 25 years, moved on to Sussex and now live in the Channel Islands. But where did it all start? My father was a plumber, as he would say, in the days when plumbers didn't earn any money. So given lots of love in life, and I think the plumbing dynamic, sort of whilst being slightly tongue in cheek, knowing how to work with my hands and being quite practically minded, gave me a sense of value, a sense of feet on the ground, and actually being able to work and have a good work ethic and work dynamic. I used to knock around with one of my older cousins who was in IT, or probably before it was called IT. I remember, for different reasons, he used to work for Lovable Bras, I think they were called, and as an IT operator, computer operator. And while still at school, did a few days going to work with him. I thought, this looks like not a lot of work and was paying quite good money. So giving him a good lifestyle. So my IT career, if you like, started off on the back of IBM mainframes for a company called Key Markets, a cheap end supermarket chain, probably like the Aldis, Lidls of this world. Then went through to manufacturing, May and Baker, as they were. No, they don't make matches. And then into the city, BZW. So all on the back of IBM mainframe operations, support dynamics.
Tell me a bit about your family, around, because you've made that journey sound really, really, really easy.
Yeah.
And I know it's not. What was, brothers, sisters? Tell me a bit about your family dynamics.
Oh, right, okay. I've got a younger sister and a younger brother. My sister met a Manc on holiday and moved north for many years, and then separated and got divorced, and is actually just remarried and now lives in the Midlands. So she's still a bit further north. I jumped on an aeroplane and went south, but very, very close with my sister, my niece and nephew, and my brother and his three lovely kids. He lives in Chislehurst in Kent. And he took a very different path. He was a treasury manager for Shell Oil. So three siblings had quite different careers and different things.
And tell me a little bit about younger Gary. What did you enjoy doing? Give me a little favour for that.
Well, if we go young, probably a character that you wouldn't necessarily recognise. I was, I'd say, a bit of a loner. Through school years, the senior school years, didn't really. I failed my 11 plus, so I went to what they was called a secondary modern school for boys and girls, and really my colleagues, my school friends, we all learnt to use these. It was, you're going to be an electrician, a brickie, a plumber, etc. And I think that was the educational streaming at that time. So I am quite practically minded. And work with my father, but in a younger time. But it got me going, thinking about things in a different way. So I couldn't do a paper round because I couldn't get up early in the morning. But a lady used to turn up with this big old truck and dump big piles of newspaper outside the house, and you got paid to go and put these through the letterbox of this whole estate. And whilst doing this, it's about once a month, it paid a fiver or something it was. And a couple of people, I'm putting it through the letterbox, and have said, I don't know why you do this. I never read it. I don't want it. I'll put it in the scrap. I thought, scrap. So I worked out a week later, I'd go round all the same places, knocking on the doors, collecting scrap paper, filling up my dad's garage to then fill his van up to take it down the paper mill and make a few pound. So I think my journey as a sort of a dabbler started making the odd buy cut and selling it and that type of thing. And but I was quite a lonely child, I think, in that way, loving family and siblings, but quite introverted. And I found out in later life, my second son was diagnosed at the age of 8 with ADHD. And my ex-wife was reading a book at the time, and the first paragraph said, "There'd be many a parent reading this saying, this is me." And at the time, ADHD had only really been diagnosed the last 25, 30 years. And I spent my £1,000, went off to the Learning Assessment Centre. And I'd like to think I'm fairly perceptive, but I had to do this psychometric testing, this IQ testing, and I weren't getting a steer from them. I'm thinking, have I not? And got to the end, and it was like this big drum roll, really. And about, oh yeah, you're riddled, mate. You're classic. You're entrepreneurial. Got your own business, and they call it the hidden disability. And typically, why you end up with your own business is you sort of end up working with people that understand your limitations. I don't have the obvious limitations that you would put with a disability. It's just the way I work. But it did start to explain some of the attributes of as a child being, a little bit lonely, didn't really like the football, didn't really like that, and didn't do that. But I think that all changed as I got to, I think, probably 14, 15 years old. Started working in a supermarket. Excuse me. And found a different group of friends, and life developed and social life developed. And started plying my white box jacket, dancing to Saturday Night Fever, thinking, did John Travolta have the right way or the wrong way? So.
You had me at Saturday Night Fever. No, never seen that as a segue into everything, into anything. Tell me a little bit about young Gary in business. I mean, I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Okay, and just to set the record straight, I did attempt to have a mullet as well, but I think all pictures have been destroyed under penalty of death. But there we go. Yeah, Gary in business. I think I need to go back just a little stage before then, that to help shape where my career has gone today. So from doing computer science at school, when it wasn't a very mature subject in its own right, I ended up working for a company called Key Markets as an IBM computer operator, as they were called, working shift work, and absolutely embraced this. But the shift work was very interesting because it gave me a good income, and I found myself buying and selling cars and doing various other things that I think were the beginnings of the sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And I know we're only talking amongst friends here, so don't tell anyone. Yeah. But I did go on to buy a sunbed that I ended up renting to my sister's friend.
I'd have had a bit of that.
I'm sure you would have done. And within 2 months, had 6 of these things. Used to move them around on a Sunday, 10 a week, minimum of 2 weeks. It was
fabulous,
mate. It was joyous fun. But having worked in retail, in operations, then went to work for a company called Man Baker. Everyone thinks they make matches, and they don't. Pharmaceutical, agrochemicals, and become a more senior operations. Went into support, and I think that was the introduction to understanding users and user experiences and some user challenges. And after a very successful career at Man Baker, moved on to the city. The company was called BZW, Barclays de Zoetwed, largely the remnants of Barcap now that we know today. and that was a deep end and a couple of bricks time. I was supporting 9 platforms, of which 8 of them I'd never used before. So from a problem and change management aspects of that, absolutely loved the city life. It was just post Big Bang, and I had that wonderful job of telling all them very, very intelligent, highly paid people that were their brief was just make it work for Big Bang. I come along and said, "Where's the bits of paper? You can't do it like that. You can't do it like that. And where's the documentation?" So, popular wasn't my middle name, but again, career defining. It made me realise the difference between financial institutions where it's about credibility, etc., where the previous company, manufacturing, very, very cost sensitive. Everything is linked back to the end product, and is your baked beans going to be half a penny more per tin? They can't afford to do it. But the finance guys very much had to be seen or to do the right things in their sector. I was enjoying quite a nice career at BZW, and I got a phone call from a company based in Sussex, Macro 4 PLC. They were looking for a salesman, and I ended up having 4 interviews. And to quote the MD at the time, he thought I was a bit of a rough diamond, so he'd put me with his 5 well refined, educated salesmen that were generally probably 5 to 10 years older than me. And he said, "Blow me down. I'll phone up the sales office 6 months after you start." And they say, "Oh, he's busy. He's on the dog talking to a punter." And he said, "I realised that the rough diamonds had roughened up my sales team." But it was a very enjoyable time there, and being rewarded for your own success just positively projected me into doing what I'm doing and love sales, and I got the accolade of the global top salesman on 2 years. So yeah, that was good. That was good. I then got headhunted by an Israeli business that ultimately became BMC Software, for those that are familiar with that area, and was asked to set up their UK entity, which I'd never done before. Ended up doing that and enjoyed that, but our routes to market were sales of their products, but we weren't given any budget to actually provide the engineering to go with it. So it became quite a challenging situation because the end users of their products were very large mainframe organisations in the UK, and they were asking for some quite heavy consultancy services. So me and a colleague at that business set up our own business, SX Consultancy. It was a play on words at the time, SX Consultancy.
Spotted that, yeah.
Yeah, it was clever. It was early days of firewalling, and we had the URL sxc.co.uk, a 3-letter word with 1 letter S and 1 letter X.
Yeah.
Didn't go through many firewalls, so that made our promotions were a little bit hard. But Essex, we grew very nicely. We got voted Deloitte and 6th top growing company in the UK, and we got a lovely little gong to go with that. Keith and I decided we wanted to go in slightly different directions with the business, so I ended up selling out my 50% of the business to Keith, and he went on to do what he did with the business.
Gary, it's an incredible journey in terms of the experiences that you gain. You know, ultimately, SX aside, love the URL. That must have been challenging.
Yes.
Digital marketing strategy needs to be reviewed. But I'm really keen on what did you learn from that, moving towards into your ultimately the bit that I didn't really know you from, which is Blue Cube.
Okay.
And I would say ultimately, what were the values that you took from that as well? So there's a couple of areas I'd love to tackle.
Well, isn't it amazing, Jamie? I set up Blue Cube Security Limited in year 2000. Here we are, 2022. So we're 22 years on. I think I was probably a bit smaller, and I certainly had darker hair at that point. But hey, a few fundamentals for me with regard to setting up Blue Cube. I set it up as a sole shareholder. So having gone through setting up a business with a partner, and then, really unexpectedly having to change that situation because we couldn't agree on where we were. So the foundations of Blue Cube was to try and believe in where I was going and what I'd learned. And what I'd learned, I felt through my background, was a sense of I need to offer a service, I need to offer solutions. And so Blue Cube was born solely in we called it security, which became IT security, which is ultimately, as we generally refer to as cyber security.
It's trendy these days, isn't it?
Mate, if the slightly anecdotal funny story was in our first office in Forest Row in East Sussex, my old office manager, she was outside, as you do, having a fag, and this guy come up, a bit of a rough bloke. He said, "Is the governor in?" And she said, "Well, why? Why do you want to speak to him?" "I need some security." And she wasn't that unattractive, and maybe you could surmise might have done a little bit of dancing. He'd seen me looking like a thug, and assumed that I did a bit more on the main guarding side of life. So that's when
Different type of security. Again, work on the marketing, Gary. Yeah.
You got it. That's when we introduced the word IT security into the strapline that evolved into cyber security. But I learned from my background from the retail and the financial sectors and manufacturing that when I was signing up as a reseller for the major names that we all know and love, and in fact where our relationship started, is the vendors wanted exclusivity. So they wanted us only to do, and I'll generally keep some of them vendor names out of it, but they wanted us only to sell their firewall, where for Blue Cube to be true to our ethos was to be vendor independent and give the customer what we truly believe what was right for them. I couldn't do that, and it was a bit of a battlefield to start with, and we didn't always wasn't always able to sell the vendors that we wanted to because they wouldn't allow us to have multiple products in the portfolio. I think today that's changed dramatically, and you can sell what you want. So we started off as an IT reseller with great support from you in your Unipalm days, and your Buffon, and and I always knew that I was very popular on a Friday afternoon. And we went on to find out why that was, Jamie, don't we? But
we do indeed.
Now, we then started to bring on our engineers and take on the engineering accreditations to work hand in hand with those reseller agreements. And that's then evolved into consultancy services.
Yeah.
And now I look at the business where, yes, we sell products, but the lead of the business is consultancy services that is actually independent of the technology.
Well, Gary, what were the, because you've got this great way of making things sound quite simple and easy, and that's half the charm and half the skill that you have. But what were the hurdles what were the biggest hurdles that you had to overcome in those early stages of really breaking into a new market?
Well, thank you for them nice compliments. The challenges were immense. Privately funded, so that was always a challenge. Personal guarantees for a big part of the beginning and actually the middle of the business. It's only when that critical mass got to such a size I wasn't having to put my house on the line, etc. And it's a big ask when you got 4 kids. They're a priority in all our lives, and perhaps we'll touch on family in a moment. But having to do that, having to work the hours that we have to work, and trying to take a balance of being a father, being a husband, in those type of things. New business that was trying to compete against some well-known names with large customers, and that was always hard. So, but we achieved it, and we've got a wonderful array of customers, some 22 years on, from some large enterprises, and scaling it right down to relatively small businesses in terms of offering our cyber security solutions. Attracting staff has always been a challenge, possibly something I should have changed some years ago. Excuse me, sorry. Is that we're based in East Grinstead in West Sussex, which was come as no surprise where home is, and it's not quite on the centre of the universe map for wannabe salespeople and wannabe technicians. They tend to gravitate to Brighton or London or elsewhere. So trying to attract the right staff and help us grow has always been a bit of a challenge. But again, critical mass is where it is today with the business. And you know, I'm pleased to say we've got a great complement of staff and still expanding as we speak. But Murphy, I think a story has to be told. A story has to be told for your viewer. If you decide to cut this bit out, I think it will be a travesty. Jamie is very supportive of Blue Cube, and he worked for Unipom, and he was very, very industrious with a couple of his colleagues at promoting various products into our organisation. And Murphy let me know one day that he'd taken a slight change in career within the company, and he was heading up I believe it's called home automation or
Home automation, Gary.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember this vaguely.
You're going slightly red, Jamie.
That's okay. That's my
okay.
tag.
That's all right then. That's good. Mine's blood pressure, by the way.
Okay.
But, and I think simply put, the home automation was looking for people with secondary homes that they could monitor remotely. And I was very fortunate that I had some properties in Portugal, which Jamie and I share a love of a certain part of the Western Algarve and had socialised down there. And he felt that it would be great if I wanted to use these properties as let's call it a guinea pig to promote their services, which I was very open-minded to do so. But mutually we agreed we would use my family home in Sussex to set the scene and get the business running and test the technology. And it didn't really quite go as well as we'd hoped, mate, was it?
It wasn't my my finest project management, but it wasn't for the want of
Never.
not trying and wanting the best for you, mate.
I think it was probably simply put the transition from what works very well in a lab and engineers screwing things together to lab engineers coming to someone's home and destroying it is probably best left there.
One of the biggest lessons that I had in life was when I drove up to your house on 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning after you'd shouted at me on a Friday, and you'd hit home enough for me to go, do you know what? Be accountable, Murphy. Go and I remember knocking on the door and your wife Sharon shouting down, who is this guy at the door? And he's the guy who's apologising for the hole. So,
and
hopefully it finished
testament to your character, Jamie. While we're still great friends and business colleagues, so many years on, we all go through ups and downs in our career. And you took that as a springboard to go on and do fantastically great things, and you know, always looked at what you've done from the sidelines with great admiration. So,
Appreciate it, mate.
yeah.
Blue Cube, 22 years, hell of a journey. And what strikes me is obviously you're going over those hurdles and the resilience you have to show, and I know that full well. And I looked to you and the journey you've been on with huge admiration and respect. But I'm really interested to see what are the bits that keep you going. Tell me about the passion and the motivation side that gets you doing this today.
Well, yeah, and it's funny actually, sort of listening to that question. You sort of come back and you go, yeah, what is it? And I think it goes back to childhood. Growing up on a council estate and actually that giving me some good foundation stones, but actually wanting to grow beyond that and the trappings of success. I like my toys, I like my cars, etc. So, you know, without using too many cliches, but the harder I was working, the more successful I was getting. So in terms of that, the business Blue Cube has grown very well with great support of our team. And you know, I've got members of our team now that have been with us 17, 18 years 20 years. One guy's actually was with me with Essex Consultancy, so he's been with me 25 years. So it's really gone straight from university. So I'm very, very blessed with that. I think the team dynamic also, I've always loved my rugby. And so I think I am that guy. I'm not the fisherman. I'm the team player. Sadly, my rugby career is somewhat behind me nowadays. But even that though, I'm a non-exec member of East Guernsey Rugby Club and Guernsey Rugby Club. So I still try and put back in and a debenture holder at Twickenham. But I suppose more relevant to my life in terms of and using Blue Cube as a springboard, Blue Cube's been very good to me and others financially, and it's allowed me to invest and buy into some other businesses, and a couple of standout ones. Having a good friend that's an insolvency practitioner is always a bit challenging when he'll phone up with some train crash or the other. And he phoned me up one day and he said, Gary, I've got a catering butcher's. It's failed as a business, and with a little bit of time and investment, it's right up your street.
Sounds a winner, Gary.
Yeah. So my first question: what the hell's a catering butcher's? He said, butchery to the great and good in London. I said, what do I know about butchery? He said, well, you've eaten a lot. So which we couldn't really dispute. So I must say, I think it was supposed to be 50 grand in and 100 grand out a year later. 5 years on and many, many multiples of that. That was very educational for me because you were dealing with different groups of people, different pay structures, transportation, running vans, organic products. You've got 80 grams worth of meat sitting in a fridge. If it dropped between a certain temperature range, it's rubbish. Money collections, you're dealing with restaurants that seem to go pop overnight and then phone you up the next day and want you to still trade with them, even though they owe you a load of money. Didn't have that in a security world. Through some initial business coaching, I went into a business and ended up owning a fraud investigation business through cognitive interviewing, not using technology, but using people skills, brain skills. And, my part of that was just really putting the business around it. The core of that business was some great fundamental people. And that has grown on to do great things as well. So it's been great experiences, but I've taken a little bit of that catering butchers, I've taken a little bit of that fraud investigation and learned as an individual that it's broadened my skill set. And I've actually put that back into Blue Cube, probably subconsciously. And I do a little bit of non-exec director work now out of industry. And I really enjoy that. And it gave me, having owned a catering butcher's that wasn't a technology company, it made me realise business is business. You just got to swap the bits and pieces around.
But I think, and I love a takeaway. I'm listed, and
Yeah.
catering butcher. You like the link there?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a loose link. I think the thing that I always like is to reflect and look at some of the things, and some of the things that stand out for me is that you haven't had fear. I mean, that's the outside looking in, because for you, you're seeing business as business, and that's something which is is probably the resilient side. But there hasn't, has there been a point where you've not fear maybe, but intrepidation, or how have you got over those sort of areas where, let's be frank, you didn't know catering, you didn't know some of those businesses that you'd set up, and I think I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Well, it feels like you pick a scab when you start thinking about fear, because I don't want this to look like there's not been fear in there, because I think fear brings on attributes where you have to dig deep. And certainly in my business career, there's been some low points. I think the banks have contributed more to that. When there's a business, we had a £300,000 overdraft facility, and because the banking changed their criteria, they dropped it to 10 grand overnight, and the challenges that brings to the business. And then ultimately, as the business owner or part owner in later years, it falls on your shoulders to make it work, and you've got that bigger extended family. And I do look at my business as a family.
Yeah,
I've only
I
got
know that,
the
mate.
one business now, And when the way you try, and I'm not saying I get it right all the time, but I try and work with people in a very humane, correct way, and how I'd like to be treated. And when you go, the finances are getting tight, and the payroll's getting near, then that is fearful. But it drives behaviour. Sometimes you can get a little bit desperate. You fall back on what you know as a salesman. But I think deep down, I've always been a salesman, and I still enjoy that. And I'd in a slightly tongue-in-cheek way, give anyone a go in the ring when it comes to selling. As to running a business, well, I've had some successes, but there are people that have been far more successful in the growth of their business than I have. And good luck to them, and I'm very pleased for them. I'm very comfortable that what we've done as a business today has grown very nicely, good foundation stones, that through the bad times, if you are going to drop back, it's not a catastrophic fall. You fall back to the last great foundation, and then you just have to regroup and rebuild. We all found that through COVID. And the challenge is that you find yourself, how do I reinvent my business to become a remote business? And actually through that year, we had 66% growth. I couldn't have done it without the agility of the team in the company, the commitment, where everyone's going, well, I can do this, I can do that. And we sort of reflect on how that all works.
So testament to you, Gary, for building and and I guess building a formidable team and building that passion around the business, which I definitely see today.
Yeah, well, thank you. As I said, you can't make it right for everyone all of the time. I can be a little bit of a hard taskmaster. So, I have my style of working. There's a few poor souls, a few poor souls probably in the industry that have worked with me or now choose not to. But I don't have too many people that run away when I come down, and I'm always happy to buy a beer or two in the bar. And I've got to know some fantastic people within the industry, not only within at Blue Cube, but our trading partners, the supply chain, and indeed customers. And I absolutely include you, easy for me to say, as a great friend that came from business. But we've actually got some customers that are friends that are now they're customers, but they started off as customers and they've become friends.
Look, Gary, you're a people person that comes shining out.
Okay, yeah, people. It comes back to that rugby thing. I think I learned this actually, and as I was saying earlier, life had been good, and you turn up in your nice car, and the guys that don't know you, when you turn up at the rugby club, think, who's that guy in the inappropriate car? But once you walk in the change rooms, you get naked, you put your kit on, and you walk out the pitch. You're all in the same, and you all need each other to depend. Because if I'm at the bottom of a ruck, I need people to look after me, and vice versa. And actually, I think that dynamic and trying to bring it, we are all human beings.
It was really good to hear a little bit more about your passions and some of the areas that I didn't know about you. Some I did, but I'm really interested in hearing a bit about influence. Maybe I've talked before about mentorship, but I think influence, I'm interested to hear from you. How, where do you gravitate towards?
Okay. I think it comes on to, or back to something I mentioned earlier, the sense of family with the business in terms of having that bigger circle of dependence. But I've got 4 children, and, they're absolutely key in my life. And they now range from 20 to 30 years old. So, 3 boys and a girl. So they're all doing very, very well in their careers. And you look at, they're all very different, and they all have different needs. And then I went for a divorce a few years back, and you reevaluate your role as a father. Possibly as a father at that point, it's always via the mother, and then that dynamic changes. So you have to sort of look at your own relationship with your own children and how you can build and bring the very best out of that, but still trying to give them guidance and influence in that. So from that point of view, that's that part that drives me on to have success, that I can ultimately support my family until such a time in the life, if ever there is time, that you don't need to do that. And influences in my life are more broader. I love a good story, and something, without sounding super cheesy, but Dragon's Den, that entrepreneurial shit. Actually, watching the Dragons is a part of that, but actually seeing what did they see in that business, and seeing opportunity. And I've more recently joined Guernsey Rugby Club, and it's a bigger business than East Grinstead Rugby Club is, but still got some of the same challenges. So what I'm able to do is look at some of the ideas that we've used at East Grinstead and bring it into a bigger National 2 club, and how we can develop sponsorship and supporting those platforms. But you have simple dynamics where you have players that are not paying their subs, but as a ZEC committee, you're all sitting there not getting paid. So it's trying to get the whole club to say we are all wholly dependent on each other. You need the prima donnas running around on the pitch, but you need the crusty old ones generating the money and the sponsorship to make that club work. Team.
Gary, great to hear some of the stories and the passions that you've got. Rugby, family, and your business come absolutely shining out, which is great. Well, one of my passions is music, as you know.
Yeah.
I'm a cool guy,
I subscribe to your channels, mate.
Brilliant. Keep going like that. Plug the channel. That's brilliant. But I'm interested in music. Come on, what gets your foot tapping and your bum wiggling?
Wow. Well, this is possibly a little bit of Achilles heel for me. My fiance Debbie and I, we get on incredibly well, and we're very, very similar in many, many ways, other than music.
Right.
Apparently, I'm a dinosaur stuck on...
She's right there, mate.
Yeah, popular music from the 80s, and if it's not a bit of Whitney and a few big ballads banging out, or a bit of any George Benson or something like that. But that's I think I grew up on that, and I know we all have a genre we grew up on, but they were good times in my life, and they started to help me define. I chucked in my Saturday Night Fever grease thing, but that was that. Probably like that, Gary, moving on from that quieter child I'd mentioned earlier in my life to probably finding my own character, and that. So should the music go on, what gets the foot tapping? A bit of, clearly now I'm at the point when it's dad dancing, we've got our first family wedding coming up later this year. Next year. So, I look forward to that. But 80s kid, me,
I knew the answer to that, really, and I knew it was tickling your fancy. And I love that, mate. And that's what I love about you. Not afraid to, even like a bit of cheese, mate, on the music front.
Or a lot more cheese.
Or a lot more. So, look, Gary, it's a pleasure, pleasure being friends.
Yeah.
Pleasure doing business. Thanks a lot for your time, buddy.
Thank you.
Take care.